Hello, everyone. My name is Vanessa Shiliwala. I'm your host, and I am so thrilled to welcome you to the first Asian and Pacific Islander-centered Speaker Expo endorsed by NAP, the National Association of Asian Professionals. For 40 years, NAP has been building leaders, culminating in the creation of the National Speakers Bureau, led by Mandy Shaw. And we encourage you to applause throughout the course of this expo. You can actually hit the clap button on your react button on the below toolbar. We'd love to see your reactions. The Speakers Expo is a momentous occasion, the first of its kind to showcase North America's finest Asian and Pacific Islander speakers and allies. Let's give it up for our first class speakers. I'd also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the Speakers Bureau founding director, Mandy Shaw, and her team, NAP's executive director, Ashley Mack, as well as all the volunteers who have so generously donated their time and talents to making today's event possible and free for everyone. As a reminder, this is a live event and only speakers will be recorded. We also encourage you to participate by using the reaction button to clap, give a thumbs up, laugh, celebrate, etc. Don't hesitate to give the speakers some love. I'm sure they'll appreciate that. You can also use the Q&A feature to ask a question. The regular chat will be disabled, although speakers can share their contact info, social handles, or website in the chat box with everyone. And we would love if you can join the conversation on social media by tagging your posts with hashtag #firstclass and hashtag Speaker Expo on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter. Over the next 2 days, we will be showcasing some amazing stories from 50 extraordinary people. I'd like to share my story with you and why the mission and vision of this organization truly resonates with me. My name is Vanessa Shiliwala, and I'm the founder and CEO of Thrive Spice Media, a podcast and social impact marketing agency dedicated to advancing AAPI mental health and leadership. I'm also a senior marketing leader with 15 years of experience at Fortune 500 companies, tech startups, and nonprofit organizations. As a first-generation Chinese, Taiwanese American born in Wisconsin and the eldest daughter of immigrant entrepreneurs, I learned to advocate for my family and underrepresented communities from an early age. My passion for social equity continued to grow as I studied communications and minority journalism at New York University, became president of Avon's Asian Network ERG, married a first-generation Indian American, became a mother of 2 multiracial kids, and an LGBTQ ally. My passion became a call to action in March 2021 when the first Stop AAPI Hate report came out, documenting nearly 4,000 hate and bias incidents in the span of 9 months. The very next day, 8 innocent people were shot in the Atlanta spa shootings. 6 of them were women of Asian descent. What mainstream society and media didn't get was that these anti-Asian sentiments, xenophobia, and casual racism have been felt in the everyday lived experiences of many Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, especially women, for as far back as many of us can remember. These events were followed by reports of increased mental health challenges in the API community, which is the least likely racial group to seek help for mental health services. This made it clear that our community urgently needed a safe space to build solidarity, share our stories, and thrive. So I created Thrive Spice, a mental health podcast and platform that seeks to amplify and create safe spaces for API leaders and change makers to destigmatize the conversation on mental health and redefine our collective identity, power, and worth. I interviewed Aparna Shirakamani of Netflix's hit TV show Indian Matchmaking on how fame impacted her own mental health and what her story means for women around the world who want freedom from racism, sexism, and people-pleasing. We talked about reshaping gender roles, girl bossing versus girl resting, and our favorite word, boundaries. In a conversation with Dr. Jenny Wong, licensed psychologist, author, and founder for Asians Up for Mental Health, we unpacked burnout and why society is okay with Asian women being anxious but not angry, and what we can do to promote healthy spaces for emotional expression for all genders. In another episode, comedian Alice Chan of MomCom NYC and I shared our personal experiences of navigating therapy and postpartum depression while holding space for joy and laughing at our own parenting fails. I spoke with queer business and political leaders who are working to improve access to mental health services for fellow BIPOC and queer folks. I learned that we can step into our power by speaking up and asking for help, reclaim our joy with our bodies, voices, and communities, and advocate for a more just, equitable world. After Thrive Spice podcast was featured on Good Housekeeping, Apple Podcasts, and the National Association for Mental Illness, I began to receive invitations to speak and host workshops at corporations and nonprofits. And that's where I found the most joy and impact. In my professional career in advocacy work, I have seen firsthand that data changes minds, but stories change hearts. That is why I believe in the mission of the First Class Speaker Expo to transform public perceptions about Asian Americans, Asian Canadians, and Pacific Islanders. Our futures depend on it. It's my honor now to introduce our Masters of Ceremonies. Most leaders at NAP are volunteers who donate their time and talent. That includes an executive board that sets strategic decisions for the NAP organization. Today, we are honored to have two national board members with us, Elizabeth Yang and Fabian DeRozario. Before serving on the national board, Elizabeth Yang led NAP as the national president. With over a decade of legal experience, she is the owner and founder of an award-winning law firm with offices in California and Taipei. Prior to practicing law, Elizabeth worked as an electrical engineer, designing radar systems for the B-2 bomber. She has authored or co-authored multiple books with inspirational messages for women leaders. A Malaysian native, Fabian has led, coached, and trained thousands of people around the world for 30 years. He is a highly sought-after speaker and trainer, delivering an average of 100 workshops and speeches every year on diversity, equity, and inclusion, unconscious bias, and inclusive leadership. His acknowledgements include the President's Award from the Georgia Society of Association Executives. Senna Bayasgalan is a marketing leader, and she will close out the program with Elizabeth, who will introduce Senna later in the afternoon. Elizabeth and Fabian, I turn over the virtual microphone to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Can you hear my voice okay? Wonderful, wonderful. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for that introduction, Vanessa. Hello, Liz, my co-MC. We opened the First Class Expo with 4 succinct messages on leadership development, starting with uncomplicating leadership. Our first speaker is an organizational psychologist who helps performance acceleration among leaders, including executives and professionals in Fortune 500, well, Fortune 100 even, and high growth companies like the New York Times, Microsoft, Johnson & Johnson. Today, she will speak about how to lead fearlessly, using her experience towing a 4,500-pound trailer, literally. The speaker is Dr. Yon Na with her message, breaking stereotypes by pushing aside fear and towing an Airstream trailer. Breaking stereotypes by pushing aside fear and towing an Airstream trailer. Yes, you heard it right. Dr. Yon Na, over to you.
Thank you so much. Hi. So I have slept in the middle of the desert in a small silver container. This container is an Airstream trailer and it weighs 4,500 pounds. It's right behind me. In it, I have all the comforts of home, a bed, kitchen, bathroom. But the best part about being in the middle of the nowhere was the utter silence and peace I felt. It was so quiet that I could hear myself breathing. My dog, Butters, and I sat at the kitchen dinette, taking in the beautiful scenery around us. And I'll always treasure that moment. But getting to this perfect point in time was not an easy one. I had towed the trailer through the Tejon Pass in California, which is over 4,000 feet in elevation, and then ascended down through the Grapevine, a long stretch of the interstate famous for icy roads and many accidents. But the thing is, I was never afraid. Owning a trailer and learning how to navigate the roads from the Grand Canyon to the bayous of Louisiana built my confidence to show up as a leader in corporate America. Now, as an organizational psychologist, I work with companies to support and grow their leaders. So why am I talking about towing an Airstream? Because the lessons I learned on the road pushed me to overcome my fears about work and life. And I'm here to share those lessons to help you alleviate any fears you might have about becoming the influential leader you are meant to be. So there are 5 critical components to pushing through your fears and becoming a successful leader. Today, I'll share 3 of the 5 lessons. So the first is overcome your fear step by step. It takes 15 steps to connect my car to the trailer. Each step is absolutely necessary since I'm connecting 4,500 pounds of machinery to my car. So imagine missing one of the 15 steps and the trailer disconnects while going 55 miles per hour on the highway. It can be a deadly situation. So taking the time to ensure I took all of the necessary steps helped me to feel safe about towing, regardless of where I was in the United States. Being a leader can also be scary. You might second guess yourself because you don't know what's around the corner. Maybe you're worried that you don't have what it takes to be the most effective leader possible. But you can overcome these fears by knowing you have taken all of the appropriate steps to get to where you are today, that you are fully equipped to do the job. Knowing this boosts your confidence. The second tip I have for you is visualizing your destination, because it will give you the courage to move forward. Had I dwelled on the grapevine and how challenging it was to navigate those icy roads, or any road for that matter, I never would have made the decision to buy the trailer. Imagining the many scary scenarios would have prevented me from taking action. So rather than thinking about what could go wrong, I imagined what could go right, such as waking up in the middle of a quiet desert landscape. So when you're in a leadership role, many things can go wrong. There's constant pressure to make the right decision, so you might overanalyze and become paralyzed by fear. But instead of thinking what could go wrong, visualize what successful leadership looks like for you, and it could be different for everyone. Do you aspire to be a subject matter expert and thought leader? Are you leading a large team? Imagine your destination, and this will help you when you get that nagging sense of dread that could get in the way of you achieving your potential. The third is to harness your naivete. To be honest, I was naive about what it meant to tow a trailer, and my naivete helped me to be open and to learn. It didn't matter that my past experiences of living in the city actually made me avoid talking to strangers. It didn't matter that a drunk driver once totaled my car and I was afraid to drive for a long time. Had I let my negative experiences influence me, I never would have traveled in an Airstream all over the US and ultimately gaining confidence. In your professional life, you may have failed, but don't let past mistakes dictate your future potential. Be naive and open to each and every opportunity. Here's what I learned about towing and leadership. Stepping up as a leader requires courage. So remember, you can overcome your fears by knowing you have taken the necessary steps to prepare yourself to lead. That's what matters. And then visualizing where you want to go and being naive to what's in the moment, all build confidence to reach your potential as an influential leader. I will leave you with one final concept. Don't make leadership complicated. When I bought the Airstream for the first time, I towed it for the first time. I didn't know anything about towing. In that moment, I knew I could do it. And the reason is because the person who was selling the Airstream to me said to me, remember, if you think it's going to be complicated or hard, then it's going to be complicated and hard. This is really wise advice for life and work. Don't make leadership complicated and become the influential leader you are meant to be. Thank you.
Dr. Yon Na, thank you. Wow. Just in a short amount of time, you certainly have given me a lot to think about. Thank you. And you can book Dr. Yon Na as a speaker at your organization, at your site. Take a look at the chat, and there's information to be able to do that. Liz, over to you to introduce our next speaker. What did you think about the message from Dr. Yon Na?
Yeah, thank you, Fabian. That was an amazing, inspirational talk. talking about leadership, courage, and literally towing an Airstream across the country. Something that is now inspiring me to do that as well. Well, moving on to the next speaker. Our next speaker is a cultural anthropologist with over 15 years of experience in designing and delivering learning across virtual, hybrid, and in-person formats, with focus on the future of work, intercultural fluency, and gender inclusion. An Asian Canadian thought leader, he has taught at top Canadian universities covering timely topics such as public policy, intercultural communication, and more. Our speaker is Dr. Nitin Deckha. Today, he is asking you to take another look at yourself, and he's going to be presenting science-based evidence that leadership is about competencies, not stereotypes. Let's give it up for Dr. Nitin Deckha.
Do you believe in the concept of natural-born leaders? I don't, and today I want to tell you why. Several years ago, Tina Kiefer, a professor of organizational behavior, conducted a research study on leadership. She asked people to draw pictures of a leader. Now, there have been many studies of what leaders look like. One study surveyed US executives regarding their perception of key leadership traits. In that study, the top 5 leadership traits identified were 1, taking initiative, 2, developing oneself, 3, honesty and integrity, 4, driving for results, and 5, and importantly, developing and motivating others. So if we take this study, a leader is someone who is made and thus not born, someone with virtues such as integrity and honesty, someone concerned about improving performance, whether their own or building it in others. This is great, but there's something I left out in the story, and it's a key detail that's going to be very important for API DA professionals. Here it is. While the executives who were surveyed rated females as better exemplifying these 5 leadership traits, in Kiefer's study, you know the professor who asked people to draw pictures of what they thought a leader looked like? Both females and males drew pictures of leaders that resembled men. Let's take a moment to let that sink in. Executives tell us that females better demonstrate key leadership competencies of integrity, honesty, taking initiative, driving for results, and developing themselves as well as others around them. Yet, when people are asked to draw a picture of a leader, we tend to draw male figures. So what does that mean? Well, it seems that in our collective socialization and culture, we identify, maybe even stereotype males as leaders. We are unconsciously identifying leaders as someone who looks male, perhaps even a male who might have been told that he's born to lead. And for people who look like women, well, we tend not to see them as leaders, even if executive surveys tell us that they're more likely to have the key leadership traits. And all of this is reflective of our society and culture's bias towards privileging male dominance, and which contributes to glass ceilings all across North America. So let's take another look at that survey from those executives. In that, we learned leadership wasn't something you're born with, it is a set of traits that you can cultivate. Of course, you may not be a leader today or tomorrow, it may be next month or next year. Keep in mind the education scholar and researcher Carol Dweck's important work on adopting a growth mindset. Leadership, like most things, can be learned. There will be setbacks. It's a matter, as Dweck says, of moving from failure to appreciating that sometimes it's a matter of not yet. What does that mean? It means that you may not be a leader right away, but with practice and time, developing these traits, you can become one. It's not a matter of never, it's a matter of not yet. It's about taking a competency development mindset that you can develop in yourself and others. Leadership is not about what you look like or what your gender expression is. That, my API DA friend, is my message. You might doubt your expertise, you might doubt your leadership abilities. Perhaps nobody ever said you looked like a leader or expected you to lead. Perhaps I want you to forget all about that. Instead, I want you to ask yourself, do you exemplify those key traits identified by these executives? Honesty, integrity, being results-driven, and developing and motivating others. Well then, my friend, take another look at yourself, because society sees you as a leader. They may not tell you that on a daily or weekly or even on a yearly basis, but if you have those traits, you have what it takes to be a leader. And you, with your depth of lived experience and expertise, have a lot to offer. So get out there. Your audience is waiting for you. And hopefully it won't be long before the time comes when another professor does a study asking people to draw an image of what a leader looks like, and they draw a picture of someone who looks like you. When I'm invited to design a leadership course or program, or to lead a webinar, or to sit on a panel of advancing equity and inclusion in leadership, this is where I start, with a competency-based approach to leadership. So let's start shifting our perception of leadership from what a leader looks like to what are the competencies we want in our leaders. This way, we can build more leaders and a broader representation and inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Deckha. That's a very fascinating test, drawing a leader, and it turns out to be more male-based than female. Very fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. Everyone, if you would like to book Dr. Nitin Deckha for a speaker, please check the chat for more information on how to book him with their Speakers Bureau. On to you, Fabian.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, Liz, Nitin's message really resonates with me. I'm sure it did with you, because that's what we do at NAP. That's why NAP, in its 40 years, how it has evolved, we are committed to building leaders, building capabilities among people, whether it's at the chapter level with all the activities that we do at the chapter level, to programs that we put in place through the volunteers, the myriad of volunteers, like Mandy, that stepped up to take on the formation of this Speakers Bureau. Nitin, your message very much resonates with us, all of us at NAP, because this is what we're trying to do, is to change the complexion of leadership, what it means, and how it shows up. And I hope all of you that are listening are going to show up in your leadership. The next speaker that I have the privilege of introducing, I've actually had the privilege of having some conversations with her, gotten to know her. She is the CEO of an international network that helps organizational leaders map strategic priorities and build C3 cultures where compassionate leaders thrive, cohesive teams that drive results, and employees collaborate and innovate at every level of the organization. So the C3 model is about compassion, cohesion, collaboration. Besides training and speaking on various stages like TEDx, she's a 3-time international bestseller author and has written in 5 publications, including a memoir about her voyage from war-torn Laos to the United States. The speaker is Mali Phonpadith. Today, she will share a leadership approach that can lead to more compassion and cohesion for leaders and teams. The title of her talk, Compassionate Leadership. Compassionate Leadership. Over to you, Mali Phonpadith.
Thank you. Imagine yourself as a board member of a very small church with less than 100 people in your congregation. You're convening to discuss whether or not to sponsor a family of 7 who were living inside a refugee camp in Thailand after fleeing war-torn Laos. You have never met nor spoken to any member of this family, but you're being asked to make the tie-breaking decision to determine whether your church could afford to sponsor them and to care for them until they are able to make ends meet and better navigate the new way of life in the United States. This scenario actually happened. This is part of my history, my journey, and the woman who had to make this difficult decision allowed her compassionate heart to override what half of the board members feared, which was whether this deed would burden the church financially. In the end, she decided that the church would have to figure it out to make it happen, and they did. That was my first exposure to what compassionate leadership can do to create real change. In our case, it saved our lives and changed everything for us. Fast forward many moons later, after having worked since I was 15 years old and with no social life really, eventually graduating top of my class, both in high school and from the University of Maryland, I was hired by a government contractor to lead their commercial marketing efforts. At age 22, what did I know about leading anything? It wasn't too long before I learned the difference between a caring, empathetic, compassionate leader and the one that was opposite of these characteristics and virtues. I was hired by the VP, a retired brigadier general, Tom, who had many years of experience leading others. His leadership approach made me feel valued, seen, heard, and truly respected. Several months after I joined the company, they hired someone who would then become my direct boss. He also had many years of experience leading others, but boy, was his leadership style the polar opposite of that of my VPs. Within the first 2 weeks of this employment, my spirit went from optimistic and engaged to fearful and invisible. Leadership styles and how we choose to communicate, interact, and manage others can either elevate someone's potential or completely dim their inner light. I could not thrive under his leadership because my spirit was completely crushed due to his inability to lead with any form of empathy or compassion. It was either perform and hit your quota or you're going to be put on probation and eventually I'll have to fire you. I was being told this almost daily. I left before this happened because I could no longer allow myself to be treated like this so poorly. In fact, I stayed too long looking back because of default programming, really. As you can imagine, I grew up in a household where my parents were fearful of authority because of what they experienced throughout the war in Laos. They taught us to put our heads down, to get the job done so we don't get in trouble. I really tried not to get in trouble, but my inner knowing, my spirit, my soul, if you will, it was screaming at me to honor my well-being over keeping my job. I was young, that's scary. So why are these examples I'm sharing so relevant to what is happening all around the globe today, with not only wars raging and all of us having gone through this dramatic impact of living through the pandemic, but also in our professional lives as we start to find some form of work-life integration, where living more purposefully actually has become the desired priority for most, if not all of us. It's relevant because we all have basic needs that are not only physical, like food and shelter, but we also have emotional needs that have to be met for us to even begin on a path where thriving is possible. We all have a role to play to support each other in our shared humanity. This has happened by leading with more empathy and compassion. This has to be the way. We've all been through our own versions of the ringer, not only through the last few years, but throughout our lifetimes. We are leading others. And if we are leading in any form or fashion, we want our communities and our workplaces to be stronger. If we want that, we must learn to listen more, to ask for and offer support. And we must not only feel for others, we must do for others so that everyone can feel safe enough to share their strengths, grow in the areas where they need to, and eventually feel that what they bring to the table is needed and extremely valuable. This is what leading with compassion to drive real change looks and feels like. This is what it ought to feel like. Earlier in my entrepreneurial journey, I had colleagues suggest not focusing on work at SOAR on compassionate leadership because they'd ask, won't people think that approach is too soft or too passive or too woo-woo, especially as an Asian American woman? You don't want your brand to align that closely with Asian stereotypes. People may think that it's because you're Asian that you've latched onto the softer leadership approach. They may not buy into the impact and it might not cause real change. This compassion thing, are you serious? Oh, well, yes, people did ask me these questions. Let me just share with you, first and foremost, leading with compassion is not what many API professionals default to doing because we're soft-spoken or passive. Many of us take this approach because it feels the most natural. Yes, most often based on our upbringing as well. And we shouldn't apologize for that, really. But mostly because this approach works. And it has nothing to do with being Asian, but rather everything to do with being well-rounded, whole humans. When we as API professionals lead with compassion, it can oftentimes be misinterpreted as us taking the softer, more passive approach to leadership. We may not be asked to step into executive roles because the perception may be that we're not vocal or bold or strategic enough, but I'm here to remind organizational leaders that this leadership approach is not soft. It's actually quite fierce, quite bold, quite courageous. It's what's making the greatest impact on employee experience and organizational culture. That's what the research suggests. I've been helping leaders and teams speak from the heart and lead with compassion for over a decade. And let me share that this approach is what allows culture transformation to become sustainable and lasting. Compassionate leaders are the ones creating happier humans, and those humans are shaping happier, more productive, innovative cultures, communities, and societies around the globe. People want their lives to matter. If we learn to lead with more compassion, we are opening up opportunities for others to become more compassionate themselves, to thrive in their own lives, which allows them to level up and move beyond compassionate leaders into becoming transcendent, legacy-driven leaders. And this work of developing compassionate, conscientious leaders is a part of my living legacy. So thank you so much for the opportunity to share my journey, my passion, my purpose with you today. I'm honored to be here.
Mali, thank you. What an effective way by your storytelling to underscore the importance of compassionate leadership. And I can corroborate with you, Mali, that last year I conducted 75 or so webinars, a little over 4,000 people. And the theme of a lot of these conversations that I have in these workshops are around the importance of empathy and compassion. That is fundamental to connecting as human beings, and then the resulting effectiveness, productivity, engagement that we want from people that are in our teams. That's the result of that message that you just shared, compassionate leadership. Thank you, Mali. So good to see you. And I pass this over to my good friend, Liz.
Yeah, thank you, Fabian. Amazing talk, Mali, especially in today's day and age when there's so much mental illness and issues going on in the society. Compassion is needed more than ever. So to welcome our next speaker, let's pose this question. Why do many Asians talk less? This question sounds so simple, and in fact, it points to cultural gaps that actually go back thousands of years. Our next speaker is going to bring us cutting edge of cognitive psychology to help us understand how the cultures in which we were raised fundamentally impact how we think and act. She's going to show us how all of this results in different career outcomes for Asians and non-Asians. And she'll give us a 5-step action plan for how we all, Asian and non-Asians, can build a powerful network more quickly and easily. Our next speaker is none other than Joy Chen.
Does this ever happen on your team? You hire an Asian American, he's smart, but in meetings, he doesn't talk. Your colleagues assume he's got no ideas and he's not a leader. Well, you don't want to be racist, but do you ever wonder if they might be right? In fact, just last year, Goldman Sachs looked at CEO effectiveness and found that the median Asian American CEO led their companies from underperforming to overperforming their sector average by 50%. They concluded that the outperformance of Asian American-led companies suggests that Asian Americans may bring unique abilities and perspectives to leadership roles that enable them to succeed. Then, if Asians have so much to offer, why don't we talk more? Today, I'll tell you why, and I'll show you how to build a powerful network of strategic allies. But first, you might be wondering how I worked all this out and got to where I am. It all started when I was a kid growing up in Maryland. That's me in the pink and white sweater. My parents, my brother, and in the middle, my grandmother, our Nanai, who lived with us. One evening, I was about 13. Dad and I were at home when he said, Tonight's the night of my department's Christmas party. I asked why he didn't go, and he said, when I go to those things, I never know what to say to people. It was like a lightning bolt had crashed down on my head. I suddenly realized two things. One, my old man and I had the same problem. We didn't know how to talk to white people. And two, I realized that this problem somehow would forever limit his career and his life. It didn't matter that he was born in China, had made it all the way to MIT, where he'd gotten a master's of engineering, and now was the hardest worker in his department. In Dad's entire 30-year career, he managed one person, the blind guy, because we live in an ableist world and no one wanted to manage the blind guy. So that night, I resolved to figure out how to connect so that I could get out there and make a difference somehow. I wasn't sure that I could because at school, I was so awkward. But after many humiliating encounters, I went from outsider to the ultimate insider. At age 31, I was appointed Deputy Mayor of Los Angeles, where I created programs which have expanded access to new skills and jobs for a generation of Californians. From there, I joined the executive search firm Heidrick & Struggles, where I found CEOs and board members for Fortune 500 companies. I started a careers blog in Chinese and English on the unwritten rules of the corporate game. And that blog went viral, taking me to China, where I wrote books and founded a leadership training company whose courses and media have served millions. Then the pandemic hit and the racial reckoning. I returned to the States and founded the Multicultural Leadership Institute. So why do many Asians talk less? Let's do an experiment. I'll show you a picture for 2 seconds. Try to remember what you see. Ready? Go. 1, 2. Okay, what did you see? Well, people from Western cultures tend to recall the fish, while Asians tend to recall the plants, frog, snail, and rocks. Neither perspective is wrong, but both are incomplete. So scientists used to believe that human cognition was universal. They're now finding that our psychology is fundamentally shaped by the culture in which we're raised. Western cultures stretch back to ancient Greece, whose geography enabled fishing and hunting and trading and shipping, lucrative careers which require less cooperation with others. With this wealth and sense of personal agency, Western cultures evolved to be individualistic, and Western thinking styles became what researchers call analytic, focusing on one thing or person at a time. Think Homer's Odyssey and ancient Greek art. The geography of ancient India and China was better suited to large-scale agriculture, requiring massive irrigation systems and highly complex social structures. So Asian societies evolved to be collectivist, with a thinking style that's called holistic, focused on things in their context. So you see this in our ancient art. Over thousands of years, specific physical and social environments created differing incentives to differing behaviors, and diverse cultures arose. Today, many Asians talk less for 2 reasons. First, values. Westerners highly value talking as the #1 way to express your individuality. Asian cultures don't value talking as much. In fact, in Asian traditions, for deep thinking, you need silence. That's why we have meditation. The second reason is cognitive differences. Westerners often equate talking with thinking, so that if you don't talk, they assume you're not thinking, which is obviously a bad thing. But as UCSB cognitive psychologist Hee-Jung Kim writes, Asians think and reason in a less verbalizable way than Westerners. It's more intuitive and less linear. So when talking aloud, Westerners just vocalize their thoughts. But Asian Americans, on top of solving the problem, have to translate their thoughts into words. Now, given the richness of all our cultures, wouldn't it be awesome if we all just naturally created networks which amplify our strengths and cover up our blind spots? Problem is this pesky thing called human nature. Human beings are social animals, and in large contexts like schools and workplaces, we splinter off into groups like this. The #1 factor that we form groups around is race and ethnicity, followed by gender. So group boundaries, as you see here, are enforced by forces of attraction. We hang out with folks like us, as well as forces of repulsion. We stereotype out-group members. For example, Asians are stereotyped as uncreative robots, tech not exec, perpetual foreigner. Knowing all this, let's revisit this scene. Who's doing what? The quiet Asian guy is being respectful, listening deeply, thinking holistically, and developing new ideas. His teammates mean well, but stereotypes have primed their brains to assume that he's got no ideas and he's not a leader. As a result, the team misses out on his ideas and excludes him from future meetings. Missed opportunities for everyone. And for that Asian guy, a glass ceiling. Asian Americans now are 6% of the US population, 13% of the professional workforce, but only 1.5% of Fortune 500 corporate officers. So the Asian American glass ceiling doesn't look like a slab of glass. It's more like a haze, like air pollution. At first, it's hard to see, but over time, it stifles the career of nearly every Asian American. So as companies, our DEI challenge is different for different groups. For African Americans and Latinos, the first challenge is diversity. We must recruit more African Americans and Latinos. Asians need inclusion and equity. Now, among Asian Americans, I was one of the lucky ones. People sometimes ask how one person could have impacted millions in the US and then millions in China. The truth is, it's never been just me. I've always scaled myself up through a whole network of allies. In fact, when the LA Times profiled me, they titled the article simply "The Networker." So how do I network? By generating pull, continuously pulling toward me fresh new people and ideas and opportunities. Now, in my 7 years as an executive search consultant, I interviewed 4,000 of the world's most successful people, Fortune 500 CEOs and the like. And you know the number one thing that they have in common? They too are masters at pull. Now, in the full version of this speech, I show you step-by-step how to generate pull, but here's a sneak peek. Next slide, please. There you go. 1, leverage your work to authentically build a broad and diverse network. 2, energize by spreading contagious positive energy. 3, tap your network for ideation and implementation. 4, continuously churn your network and nurture your relationships. And 5, pursue mutual wins, because at the end of the day, you're not here just to create your own success. You're here to co-create everyone's. Now, often as I do this work, I think back to my dad, who came to the States with so much hope and so much potential, and then became that quiet Asian guy, sidelined as not a leader. It's too late now for Dad. He died in the pandemic. But each time I remember him, I think of how awesome is this power that we each now have to unlock our own potential and the potential of others. Now, I know that after 3 years of pandemic and racial reckoning, many of us are exhausted and grieving. But let us now not compound all the tragedy by failing to act. I may not know you, but I do know this about you. You were born to make an impact. You have something good and important to offer our world, even if you don't know it yet, even if sometimes it feels too deep and too risky to create something special and share it out. Just start now, pulling in allies and co-creating success with them. And I'd love to co-create success with you. In addition to my keynotes, workshops, and fireside chats, I teach the Asian American Leadership Accelerator, an online course and social learning experience to help you break through and scale your impact. Learn more at themli.net, and I'll pop these links into the chat. Meantime, Fabian and Liz, back to you.
Thank you so much, Joy. That was very inspirational, and it's such an honor to have a former deputy mayor join us for today's Speaker Bureau. I found that chart very fascinating. I saw the fish, so not sure what everyone else saw, but I guess because I grew up in the Western culture, maybe that had an impact. But very interesting to see how, you know, different people growing up in different communities see different things, different perspectives. Well, this concludes the leadership issue topic of our Speakers Bureau today. If any of you would like to book Joy Chen for another event, please look at the chat for information on how to reach her. And on to you, Fabian.
Yeah, thank you very much, Liz. Since you're in Los Angeles, you should connect with Joy.
Absolutely,
I'm surprised
yeah.
you've not had a chance to connect with her with all the networking that you do in Los Angeles. Joy, thank you for sharing your amazing message. Congratulations on all your accomplishments. And I'm sorry for the loss of your father just recently. I noticed that we have almost 160 attendees. The number just came down, but I know we hit about 160 just a few minutes ago. Thank you all for dedicating a part of your busy day to focus on you, right? That's why you're watching this. That's why you're listening to this. For those of you, I know that some of you are calling in from your phone. Obviously, you're doing this because you believe in what some of our speakers have talked about. For us to grow our abilities, we got to invest in ourselves, and you are clearly investing in yourself. Now, we need your help. The tenure of this expo is in transforming public perceptions about Asian and Pacific Islander Native Hawaiian professionals. We have a global management consulting company. You may have heard of this company, Kearney. They are helping us measure the expo's impact. One of the measurements, of course, is your feedback. Now, we are going to launch in just a few seconds here a short poll that only takes about 20 seconds for you to complete. Would you do that, please? You see that popping up right there on your screen. Please go ahead, select your answers. And all the participants in the poll actually are going to have the opportunity to win the first swag. Oh, yeah. We got door prizes here, people. Donated by Kearney's chairman and CEO. Oh, we are just so pleased to have this kind of partnership with Kearney. And so with that, you know what? I'm going to participate.
Well, let's as we're waiting for the poll results, you know, or let's announce our first swag. What is it going to be? So our first swag that we're giving away is a newly published book, Joy Works: Empowering Teams in the New Era of Work by Alex Liu. He's the chairman and CEO of Kearney. And I understand that Mr. Liu is a Taiwan-born San Diego native, also in our Southern California area. His book offers a step-by-step action plan for approaching joy at work using the 3 key drivers that determine employee happiness: people, praise, and purpose, and learn how to implement that plan for maximum results and maximum joy. Fabian, were you looking for that book on your bookshelf?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, you probably read his book before. So the lucky winner of our first swag today is going to get his newly published book. Can we get the results of the tabulations?
Yes, let's see that.
Yeah.
Okay, we're waiting on that. We've got a speakers chat group where Mandy and some of her staff that are helping us in the background. That's how they keep in touch with all of us, organizing and sequencing all of us as we work through the script here.
Oh, the winner is Fabian DeRozario.
No. Okay.
Just kidding.
Okay.
He's like, no, I already have
Mandy,
it.
that was when my name popped up, I panicked. Mandy, that was a good one. That was a good prank. And then she put "just kidding" in the chat. Oh my goodness. Okay, we got to have a little bit of levity here, right?
It's right.
All right, let's see here.
All right.
Oh, there we go.
The winner is Grace Ho of Dow. Congratulations, Grace. And when you post about today's event on social media, whether you won or not, please use our hashtag Speaker Expo. Joy, did you want to say something? No, you're good? Okay.
All good, I guess. Yes. So I guess should we just continue?
Yeah, let's
Now
continue.
that we've made that announcement, we will now proceed with our regularly scheduled program. We will continue the Speaker Expo with 2 more messages about Asian and Pacific Islander identity and narrative. The first, or our next speaker, is Jolene Jang. Get ready, because she's got some great energy. I've seen a video of her. She was previously known as the Fun Specialist and is now called the Asian Inclusivity Consultant. She trains employees to be Asian inclusive in order to attract and retain Asian American and Canadian talent and clients. Jolene was interviewed by Oprah. Oh, can you fit in a little comment about that? How about that? She was also on the Today Show and Good Morning America. She works for Fortune 500 companies to create inclusive cultures. Jolene has done hundreds of video interviews and podcasts, sharing the lives of Asian Americans to invite Asian allies to speak up. Today, she provocatively asks, aren't Asians all alike? And she's going to provide the answers. Aren't Asians all alike? The misunderstood Americans. Jolene Jang.
Thank you. Well, aren't Asians all alike? That is a question I ask in my training programs. And I wish the typical answer was, no, are you kidding me? That is so ridiculous. Absolutely not. But unfortunately, people don't know that Asian Americans are descendants from 48 countries, 2,300, 48 countries, 3 territories, 2,300 languages, hundreds of generations. And it's so diverse. You have mixed people like myself, Japanese, Chinese, and Swedish, 4th generation in America. But the truth is, people don't know anything about Asian Americans. Last year, there was a survey, and this is what it said. 42% of Americans could not name one single prominent Asian. So the question for you is, can you? There's a little hint here. So if your answer was Jackie Chan, he's Hong Kongese. And what about, Bruce Lee? Yeah, nailed it. However, he did die 50 years ago. So Hollywood does not do us any favors. So you may remember this, 16 Candles. So this is Long Duck Dong. His name is Long Duck Dong. So each time he enters the scene, there's this big gong. So this sort of thing perpetuates Asian Americans being seen as the perpetual foreigner. Ask an Asian American coworker, hey, how many times have you been asked, where are you really from? And how often are you asked to tabulate the restaurant bill? And how many times are you confused with the other Asian coworker that looks nothing like you? So Asians are the misunderstood Americans, and we do experience microaggressions, and these can escalate to violence. Just last year, 1 in 5 Asian Americans experienced a hate incident. And I did. And many of us no longer walk alone anymore. I don't. So this is hard for non-Asians to understand. So that's why I've conducted hundreds of interviews with Asian Americans. And what are they feeling? What are their factors they need to think about before they walk outside? And I also share with you why this is important to you and your organization. Because if you want to retain and attract Asian talent, then you need to be Asian inclusive and culturally competent. So take a look at your diversity, equity, inclusion training. What's it missing? Perhaps the Asian American component. If you look at your DEI curriculum, how much of that is Asian American? Probably 0. So unfortunately, last week I went to this convention, and it was a global convention, and their emphasis really is on diversity, equity, inclusion. So how many of the 73 presenters were Asian American? Yeah, 0. So include Asian Americans. Here's your opportunity. What are you planning for May? May is coming up. May is Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And I encourage you, besides Chinese takeout and a line dance, to educate your employees, highlight the contributions that Asian Americans have made. And when you were looking at your competitive analysis for this year of your different markets you'd like to target, think about Asian Americans. Did you know that Asian Americans make the highest median income of all Americans? And they have the highest levels of education. And also the population of Asian Americans is growing at the fastest rate. And if you look at their purchasing power, in just the last 20 years, it has shot up by 314%. And with $1.2 trillion in purchasing power, that is twice and thrice that of the Black and Hispanic purchasing power. And just last year, Asian Americans spent 11% more than the average household. So there are companies who are taking advantage of this and profiting. So that would be Warby Parker, Ray-Ban, Oakley, and they saw that, oh, you know what? Asian faces are different than white faces. So they have Asian fit glasses. So there are companies that are looking into this. So what is it costing your company if you are not appealing to Asian Americans? In 2045, the US population is going to be over 50% people of color. So how are you training up your workforces to really adjust to these changing demographics? How are you going to get them to be culturally competent? Competent, yes. So I know it's hard to talk about race and ethnicity and culture, so I approach it carefully. So what I use is gamification. I find that is easier to really ease people into these delicate discussions by using familiar associations and gamifying it, using Name That Tune, Jeopardy, and then bringing it to them and using pop culture as well. And why is it relevant to them and today? So I have a question for you. Here's an example. The way you can be respectful is to pronounce names correctly. So how do you say this Vietnamese last name? Is it Nguyen, Noon, Win, or Nguyen? So if you said win, you win. And if you can pronounce win, that's 40% of the 99 million Vietnamese people of the world. So another question. So in Texas, what is the most common language spoken besides English and Spanish? It is Vietnamese. So Asian Americans, we are out there. We are the podcasters, the YouTubers, the politicians, Olympiads, and we've contributed to building and protecting America, while specifically being banned, incarcerated, and attacked simply because of our ethnicity. And a lot of people do not know about this. So is it time to incorporate Asian inclusivity into your DEI program? It is the right thing to do. You have an opportunity to create a community where Asian Americans can feel safe when they walk in public, and to feel respected at work, and to be considered as Asian Americans. So what do you choose to do? Thank you. That is the question.
And Asians are not all alike. Jolene, it's such a pleasure to see you, to listen to you, real time here. People, if you are a leader at an ERG, BRG at your company, you need to advocate for getting Jolene to speak at your organization. Contact us at NAP, at the Speakers Bureau at nap.org. You've heard all these speakers. There are more speakers to come. I don't know about you, Liz, I'm feeling just so prideful to see such amazing and to listen to such amazing speakers like Jolene. I am so inspired. Over to you, Liz. We got more.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Mandy and her team did such an amazing job gathering all these speakers. This is a sold out event. For those of you who are on today, you were one of the lucky ones to snag a spot. Some of my friends who wanted to join last minute could not get a ticket. It was completely sold out. They could not join us. So, hopefully the recordings will be made available, but enjoy all of these fabulous speakers as we move on to the next one. Our next speaker is an award-winning broadcast journalist, professor, author, and has been both a US-based and international anchor, host, correspondent, and producer for media outlets, including CNN, CNBC, NHK, Oxygen Media. Through the Mei Lee show, she became a prominent voice in the effort to combat anti-Asian hate that exploded due to COVID-19. Our next speaker is Mei Lee, recognized for her powerful voice for Asian Americans. She was named one of Forbes 50 over 50 women leading the way in Impact's July 2021 and one of 50 unsung heroes by Asian Hustle Network in April 2022. Today, she encourages us to deprogram and reprogram the narrative. Let's give it up for Mei Lee.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here. And thank you so much for that introduction. And as you just heard, I do have many roles and I wear many hats, but journalism is the biggest hat and the longest hat, or longest time I've worn that hat. Over 30 years, I've been a broadcast journalist around the world, as you just heard. And journalism is an honor because I'm a storyteller. I'm a truth seeker. That's changing by the day, as we can see when it comes to journalism, but we do try to seek the truth and we try to give voice to the voiceless. And that's an honor, especially because I grew up in Ohio in the 1970s. And you can imagine, as an Asian kid, being the only Asian kid around except for my brother, that was a challenge. I didn't have a voice. I didn't have much of an identity being Asian because I was treated as the other and the perpetual foreigner. So being a journalist is more meaningful to me because of those experiences. Throughout my career, though, I thought things had gotten better when it came to the racism and the otherizing of Asians and other people of color. But then, of course, as we all know, COVID-19 hit, and that's when anti-Asian hate started exploding. And so I use my platform to become a very, very vocal activist, trying to push back and trying to change this narrative, this false narrative that has existed for centuries about Asians, as we know. But of course, COVID just kept on going, and it still is going. So I had to ask myself, why is this happening? Why does this continue to happen? And what I found was that it's because of this mass programming that we've all gone through. Why? Because this programming comes through education, through the media, through advertising, through politics, just across the board. We've all been programmed to think and feel a certain way. And that is dangerous because these false narratives then are created. So there's this lack of awareness now when it comes to Asian Americans because of the lack of education, lack of history, lack of conversation. Our experiences are not shared. So I always use this example when I'm teaching. I'm also an adjunct professor at USC, and when I'm giving workshops and lectures to companies, I ask people, how many of you learned about slavery in school, the horrors of slavery? Everyone did. How many of you have learned about the Holocaust during your educational experience, the horrors of the Holocaust? Everyone has. But hardly anyone knows about AAPI history, the centuries of AAPI history. And because of that, there's no awareness and there's no understanding, and therefore there's no empathy for our community, like there is to a certain extent for the Black community and the Jewish community. Just even recently, an 18-year-old student in Indiana was stabbed multiple times by a white woman, 56-year-old woman, because she said to the police, she's Chinese, and this is one less person to blow up our country. So she was seen as the perpetual foreigner again, the other, dehumanized to the point that she was wanting to stab her multiple times. And then this follows an offensive mocking of Asian language by the chancellor of Purdue University Northwest. At a commencement speech just this past December, he made fun of an Asian language, thinking it was a joke. And yet he is still in his position of power with no recourse. So why does this keep on happening? Well, that's why I say we need to deprogram and reprogram ourselves and others. So let me show you a slide, if we can pull that up. Let me just give you a couple of ways in which we can deprogram and reprogram ourselves and others. we need to first talk to each other. And what I mean by that is not superficially, not like, oh, hi, how you doing? Oh, I'm fine. We need to talk to each other in depth. Get out of your comfort zone. Microaggressions, you need to recognize them in yourselves and others. We all have them, and then call it out. We need to educate ourselves and others. Push for AAPI curriculum, workshops, media, better representation. That's why I developed a brand new course at USC called Evolution of Asian Americans and the Media. And finally, anger. All right, this might be a little controversial, but stay with me. Anger is a tool that can be very useful because it inspires you, it guides you to act for the greater good if you use it well, because then it forces you to speak up and speak out and push back, not sit there silently and take the abuse. And finally, let me end with a story about anger and how it's been useful to me. And I'll admit it's been useful many times. But this one, I think, is very, very illustrative of how I used it. It was many years ago, I visited Auschwitz in Poland. It's a very somber place, as you can imagine. My friend and I were a little chilly, so we went inside to get some coffee while we were looking around. There's a group of students there, local students. They're probably junior high school students. And when I went to the counter, a group of those boys was standing next to me, and they looked over at me and they started doing the ching chong to me. As you can imagine, I was horrified because here I was at Auschwitz, a place of such horror and pain. And these boys were making fun of me because of what I looked like and who I was. And so I took that anger and I tried to use it. I called the teacher over and said, can you please gather all of your students around me? I need to speak with them. And I told her to translate everything I said. And in a nutshell, I said, you are here at a place of such horror where people were killed for who they were, just because of who they were, nothing else, no crime. And here you are now looking at me because I'm different and I look different, and you're otherizing me and you're trying to dehumanize me. You need to take this lesson right now where you are and take it for the rest of your life, because this cannot happen. This kind of hate cannot happen. And I knew I was effective. Why? Because every student had their head bowed and it was dead silence. And so that's how you can use your anger and your voice to make a difference. So I thank you very much for this opportunity. And I hope that I will meet a lot of you in person or online someday. And I would love to present to you all the information that I have and all the educational background that I have and all the experiences as a journalist I have. Thank you so much.
What a powerful statement, May. I'm getting goosebumps listening to everything you said. And anger is a very great motivator. You know, just how you respond and take it. You can make a lot of forward moving action with that. So, and exactly what you did. So I'm sure you had a big impact in those boys' lives that day and a big lesson learned. So thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah, it's a wonderful message, Liz, that we have to have courage, courage for ourselves to speak up, but also courage for others to speak up for others. Maylee's message reminds me of the importance of allyship. We have non-Asians participating today. Obviously, you are allies for the community, but even among Asians, when we can't be bystanders. If there's a microaggression, something offensive that is said, the moment presents itself to speak up. Wow, I would have loved more time with May. She said a lot of things which are very, very powerful.
Yeah, well, if anyone else wants more time with May, you guys have an opportunity to book her. Just go into chat and connect with her for more information on how to book May.
Yeah. Liz, you and I have a board meeting tomorrow. I'm going to just say this out loud, unselfishly, and that is we need to try to influence one or two or three of our Speakers Bureau speakers in this expo to come and speak at our leadership convention in Boston in the month of August. I'm sure Mandy probably has that strategy as part of a plan, but I was just thinking that this is such a beautiful opportunity.
That's a great
All right.
idea.
Yeah. Okay. Poll time. Poll time. We have another poll that Mandy's going to put up. Take about 20, 30 seconds for you to complete. Select your answers. And then
Yep, more giveaways and more swags, more
That's
goodies.
right. That's right. And I better, so Mandy can't pull that prank on me anymore. So I'll be ready for that.
It's hard to catch you off guard, baby, and she got you that one.
I know it was too funny. It was too funny.
You're like, no, I don't need the prize. Give it to someone else.
I know.
Yeah. Well, if you're curious about what the next swag item is, answer the 3 questions in the poll, and the second swag of the day is an exceptional value. It's 2 group coaching sessions. Here's the description: bust unhelpful stereotypes with practical strategies grounded in social linguistics, data science, and technologies. You're going to get 2 45-minute informative yet fun sessions that cover self-advocacy strategies for introverts or people who think they are introverts, and get to the point to get what you want. Timing is everything. This swag is reserved for the first group that claims hashtag first class VIP status at the expo as well. So everyone's
I'm curious. I wonder if this coaching session is donated by one of our speakers. I would assume so. It doesn't say that on my script, and of course the winner will be contacted directly by Mandy and make the connection for you to get your swag, and whether it's this or any other swags that we have planned.
Yeah, lots of great giveaways today.
So I think Mandy is still looking for a winner.
Oh, got a message. The first group that reserved a VIP first class spot is California Bank and Trust.
Welcome to the session. Thanks for participating. And many other organizations that are represented here, individuals as well as leaders at a variety of different organizations. Welcome to this NAP program.
Yeah.
What do you think? Should we just move forward with our next speaker? I'm just so excited and anxious to hear all of our speakers. Shall we proceed?
I think let's give just one more minute for to announce the winner while they're working on that. Well, I guess they'll put that in the chat. So yeah, why don't we proceed then?
Yeah. And I'm also wondering if the announcement that we just saw in the chat, California Bank and Trust, that I wonder that itself would be anyways, whoever won the swag, you can be assured Mandy will follow up with you. Our next speaker started her career as a classroom teacher and then as a teacher educator. This experience informs her beliefs about the role that education can and must play in the realization of social justice. As a professional trainer, her area of focus have included workplace cultures, leadership skills, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. The speaker's name is Dr. Sarah SoonLing Blackburn. Today, she's going to break the perpetual foreigner myth. You've heard that mentioned by our previous speaker. She's going to use history, data, and stories to share on this topic. The topic again, breaking the perpetual foreigner myth, Asian Americans and belonging. Please welcome Dr. Sarah SoonLing Blackburn.
Thank you all so much. Thank you everyone for being here today. Like Fabian just said, I want to use storytelling today to go deeper into a concept that many of the speakers today have been talking about, which is the perpetual foreigner stereotype. So when I graduated from college, I moved to a new state and started working as a school teacher. At the very first staff meeting, my principal was introducing the new staff. So she gets up and she says, "This is Mr. So-and-so. He's our new math teacher. This is Miss So-and-so. She's just moved here from Pennsylvania. And this is Miss Blackburn. She's our first Asian teacher." Now, she actually used a much more outdated term instead of Asian, but we'll save that part for another day. The point was this: the most remarkable thing about me wasn't, what I was going to be teaching or where I had moved from, like the other new teachers. It was my Asianness. I recognized that she was speaking from pride about the school's diversity and excitement that students would be getting to experience something different. But that's another key word: different. My Asianness marked me as something other, someone new, and that really sets you apart. That first day at lunch, I sat down with my new colleagues, and this very kind, very lovely veteran teacher looked over at me and said, "Oh, wow, you eat sandwiches too." It took a long time before people stopped viewing me through this lens of she must be different. And I'm not actually sure that this ever did stop. It seemed like I would always be an outsider. This is my specific experience, but it's not all that different from the experiences of Asian people who work across industries, across North America and many other parts of the world today. If you've heard that line of questioning, where are you from? No, but where are you from? Where are you from originally? That is the same phenomenon. If you've ever heard Asian accents or foods or customs described as exotic, that is the same phenomenon. If these feel like squishy stories or, not that big a deal complaints, let me give you some hard numbers. The 2022 Status Index report found that Asian Americans are the least likely group to say that they feel like they belong in the United States. Only 29% of Asian American respondents said they feel like they belong. That's fewer than 3 in 10. Asian employees are valued for the diversity that they bring, just like in my experience on that first job. And while we might be treated with warmth and welcome on the surface, there is often this undercurrent of othering that still persists. And if someone feels other, then how can they really feel like they're included? How can they feel like they belong? My research in the field of education taught me a lot about the conditions that help kids succeed. Kids perform better and feel better when what they're doing matters to them, when they have trusting relationships with their teachers and their classmates, and when they feel like they can be themselves, fully themselves at school. These days, I mostly work with and study adults, and I found that adults really need the same things to thrive at work. When we care about what we're doing, when we have trusting relationships, and when we feel like we can be ourselves, we perform better. And maybe even more importantly than our performance and the outputs we can bring to our companies, there are deeper, more lasting impacts as well. Our satisfaction goes up, retention goes up, and general well-being goes up. So how do we square these two concepts? We know these critical components of workplace success, and yet we know that for many Asian employees, there is that persistent undercurrent of otherness. You can't fully be yourself or have trusting relationships if you don't feel like you belong. So what do we do about this? Well, belonging is my area of expertise. I can help you with trainings and talks on a range of topics. And for this short version today, I want to dwell on one important area of belonging that particularly affects our Asian and Asian American communities. It's important for all of us to have language for these concepts so we can recognize and label them when they happen to us or when we see them happening around us. The perpetual foreigner stereotype is the idea that no matter how long an Asian person has been in the United States, or no matter how many generations, even in many cases, they will never quite fully belong. This perpetual foreigner stereotype has deep, deep roots, and we have to recognize that this persistent otherness, this questioning of our loyalties, these barriers to acceptance and belonging are a lot older than just our current climate. At the beginning, I told you a story about me, a Chinese American woman moving to a new place and being seen as an exotic outsider. So now I want to tell you about someone else, the first Chinese woman we have records of coming to the United States and her story. I wrote a book on Chinese American history that will be out next year as part of the Race to the Truth series. And this story opens up that narrative. On October 17, 1834, a ship called Washington arrived at New York Harbor. On board the ship was a young woman who had come to be known as Afong Moy. This wasn't her birth name, but her real name has been lost to history. She was about 19 years old when she arrived in the United States. Afong Moy was brought on this ship by some American merchants who were trying to sell Chinese goods to the wealthy elite of the East Coast. These potential customers didn't really know much about China, so the merchants thought that they could draw them in with a real Chinese woman. The merchants held exhibitions, and with the help of an interpreter, their thought was Afong Moy would explain the furniture, the textiles, the other things they had to sell. But it turned out the crowds were a lot more interested in her. The merchants realized they could make money just by exhibiting her, never mind the stuff they had for sale. So they started making posters advertising the Chinese lady. She was brought on tour. She was even brought to the White House. But everywhere she went, she was a curiosity, a spectacle. The crowds loved to marvel at her exotic clothes and her strange bound feet. Eventually, she joined the ranks of the circusman P.T. Barnum. Afong Moy never returned to China, but America never treated her like this could be home either. Do you know the story of Afong Moy? Most people say they don't. Erasure of history is a central way that harmful stereotypes persist, and we have to undo those erasures. We have to tell these stories. When you think of the numbers of Asian Americans who say they don't feel like they belong, think back to Afong Moy. Nearly 200 years later, why are people still being asked, but where are you from? As if they couldn't possibly be from here. Why don't people know that this is even an ancient, long-standing pattern to begin with? What could have been done differently then? And what can all of us do differently now? Nearly 200 years later, it is finally time once and for all that we shatter this perpetual foreigner myth. We can create new stories of belonging to outweigh those centuries of othering. You know, speakers like the ones today are wonderful for helping us undo these erasures, this invisibility, and starting to think about how we build better structures for inclusion. Because the more that any one of us belongs, the more all of us belong. Thank you.
It's a wonderful message. Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you so much for your commitment to this important topic of belonging. You know, we always talk about inclusion, which is the act of trying to be inclusive, but we also have to care about what inclusion would mean on the receiving side. And that's where this term belonging comes from, is about understanding the impact of our actions towards others. You have so much that you can message to help shape organizational culture. Thanks again for being a part of this expo. If you want to book Sarah to speak at your organization, again, you'll see that in the chat. Write to Mandy at speakersbureau@nap.org. Over to you, Liz.
All right, thank you, Fabian. On to our next speaker, who is a Filipino-American anti-bias and anti-racist educator, spoken word poet, and author of a forthcoming book that provides practical ways on embodying a pro-Asian American lens while combating anti-Asian American violence, racism, and hate for K-12 educators. His work has been featured in NPR, Harvard Ed Magazine, the Smithsonian, just to name a few. Today, he coaches CEOs, principals, and in 2021, he was honored with a NAP Inspire Award. This speaker is no other than Tony DelaRosa. Today, he shares with us a Filipino ancestral tool for racial unity, ISANG BAGSAK. Please welcome Tony DelaRosa.
What's good, y'all? I'm gonna start off with a poem. ISANG BAGSAK as verb in Tagalog, translated as unity as verb, unity as action across lines of difference and across lines of passion. So my topic is ISANG BAGSAK. And some of y'all are like, ISANG BAG what? Isang Bagsak means we fall and rise together, ultimately symbolizing solidarity in the face of injustice, starting from the Philippine anti-martial law movement in the 1970s, when the Marcos regime ruled the Philippines and crippling the economy, emboldening a political corruption and suppressing any sense of Filipino social justice that existed. So activists use Isang Bagsak as the clarion call to stand up and speak out, which is a tool that I'm expanding as a researcher now, as an educational framework that will help you push your allyship into action. But what does it even matter today, right? In a post-George Floyd era, Stop Asian Hate era, anti-LGBTQ plus era, and more, we need leaders to recognize that Asian Americans are a part of the story of social justice and collective solidarity. Today, we are still seen as meek, humble, docile human beings. I would argue to the point of invisibility, not to say that we don't have our moments like Michelle Yeoh, but people don't recognize us for being a part of the fight for social justice and civil rights. Not a problem. I see this manifesting in classrooms in K-12, in higher education, having taught at Harvard, all the way to the corporate sector. So I'm here to change that with you. There's two ways, I'm just giving you a taste of two. Two ways you can embody this in your company is one, embodying it through multi-partiality. Multi-partial what? I'll tell you that a little bit more about that. And then building opportunities for Asian American ERGs to do cross-racial work. So let's start with multi-partiality, which is the mindset. This concept means holding multiple perspectives, but then amplifying Asian American voices, but then going even deeper of privileging some of our most invisible, like talking about invisible of the invisible race, right? The intersectionalities of Black Asian, multi-ethnic Asian. I'm talking about Asians with disabilities, queer and trans Asians, brown and Southeast Asian, because historically, when we talk about being loud, even within the Asian American community, who do we center? Think about that. East Asian voices, mostly cisgender, heteronormative, patriarchal East Asian voices. So what about the rest of our intersections and identities and the invisibility that exists within this invisible bubble? Knowing that there are layers of invisibility, I can help your company think about how to ensure that we center the most invisible narratives, which helps your company embody the equity in DEI. So number two is how can you find and build opportunities to have your Asian American employee resource groups, your ERGs, do cross-racial coalition building? Simple. There's a simple moment in some historical programming and thinking about Latinx and Hispanic Heritage Month, right? And Filipino American History Month. That's coming up, right? Way in September to October, which is an overlap. Why don't we talk about the Delano grape strike of 1960s to inspire the importance of racial groups coming together, building their strengths and power in numbers, right? Or thinking about the Black community. There are unresolved tensions based on Asian Americans seen as the solution POC, the model minority, and the Black community stereotyped as being the problem minorities, right? We rarely get to see us in coalition together, sharing our resources, celebrating Black, Malaysian, and Asian solidarity, and how that is a template for social change. There's ways we can do this through programming and policies. So in closing, when you think about Asian America and Asian American diaspora, I want you to think Isang Bagsak. In fact, say it with me on 1, 2, 3. Isang Bagsak. And remember the two components that we shared today: multi-partiality, which is a mindset, and then taking your ERGs to the next level with cross-racial coalition building. So if you want to learn more, you can find me at Tony Rosa Speaks on any IG, Twitter, TonyRosaSpeaks.com. And I would love to work with you and bring this ancestral tool from the Asian American community to you. Thank you and salamat.
Isang BAGSAK. I'm going to remember that going forward. Yeah, all of us, together we are stronger. What a great message. Bring all of us Asians together in a multicultural coalition. Very powerful message. Thank you so much for coming and sharing, Tony.
Liz, Tony's energy just emanates through Zoom, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, from the very beginning, I'm like, wow.
He just captured my attention. What a wonderful message. What a wonderful spirit and energy that just you transmitted. Thank you, Tony. The next speaker, my friends, is a writer, a community leader. and a workshop facilitator who provides groundbreaking DEI&B, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging solutions for organizations of all sizes, specializing in Asian American identity, culture, storytelling, career development. His mission is to empower workers with the agency to transform themselves, their workplaces, and society at large in order to overcome what he calls toxic invisibility. The speaker's name, Ryan Takemiya. Toxic invisibility is his topic. Please, everybody, welcome Ryan Takemiya.
Hey, everybody. My name is Ryan Takemiya, and I am a little nervous to be here. I mean, to be among such illustrious, amazing speakers. And to be honest, I don't know if I'm going to say anything all that different than all the amazing speakers who've already presented, but well, I help Asian Americans overcome what I call toxic invisibility, which is a new term to describe a very old problem. And that is the exclusion that we as Asian Americans feel at work, at home, in society, and even inside our own minds. So to overcome toxic invisibility, I believe you need three things: healing, storytelling, and cultural shift. And to illustrate why I focus on those things specifically, I'm going to make a little wager here. I'd be willing to bet money that if you're Asian American and I asked you right here, right now, to tell me one thing that you're proud of, or maybe one thing that you could brag about, or even just say something nice about yourself, I'd bet that you'd probably have a minor anxiety attack. Or if I were to ask you to tell me one thing that you're bad at, or tell me one thing that tell me about a time that you failed or made a mistake, I bet that your head would fill with about a dozen examples. Now, how do I know this? Well, because you're probably just like me. Now, a career development person who is not familiar with the Asian American experience might come in here and say something like, well, you should turn that around. You should be proud. You should brag about yourself, be aggressive, take up space. But if you're not an aggressive person, if you don't normally brag about yourself, then you would be forcing yourself to be someone you're not. A career development person unfamiliar with the Asian American experience won't know that there are about a dozen different reasons why you won't brag about yourself, both external reasons and internal reasons. Some of them are obstacles imposed on us externally, like racism, white supremacy, capitalism, the very structure of the American workplace itself. And some of the obstacles we impose on ourselves, some of them psychological, and some of them even cultural, as you heard in some of the talks before me. Now, a career development person might even say to you, might even say to Asian Americans as a group, that you need to change in order to fit in or to advance, that you need to learn the language of the American workplace, that you need to look at successful people and emulate them, copy them, do away with the parts of you that aren't working. Now, if this sounds familiar, it's because it is the exact same kind of societal pressure that we feel to assimilate to America in general. And it's that kind of pressure that I'm hoping to eliminate, one workplace at a time. Because that kind of pressure is not only making us feel left out of the workplace, but it's making us feel unsatisfied with ourselves. I'll tell you a little story about myself. I'm actually half Japanese, half Chinese, and I'm also fourth generation Asian American in the United States, in California, which means that it was my great grandparents actually that first came over about 100 years ago. That, and being from the San Francisco Bay Area, you would think that I would be pretty comfortable in my Asian American identity. But the truth is that just like every other Asian American person around the world, when I was young, all I wanted was to fit in. So I did everything I could to shed my Asianness. Now, everything was going fine until I met someone who would actually change my life forever. In college, I met a young Asian American woman who was from the Midwest, and she grew up as the only Asian American person in her high school, and her family was the only Asian American family in their entire town. I mean, she was more immersed in white culture than I ever was, and the pressure for her to assimilate was so strong. But she said that no matter how hard she tried, the people in her community only ever saw her as an outsider. And she actually revealed to me that it got to the point where she wanted to be white, so badly that she actually hated her own face. That when she woke up every morning, she looked in the mirror, she didn't like the face that looked back at her. She hated the face that looked back at her. And that's when I realized that this pressure to assimilate was, was slowly destroying us. Neither of us wanted to be ourselves, so we were erasing ourselves from the picture, almost quite literally. And over the years, I would meet and hear of more and more Asian Americans who wanted so badly to erase themselves that sometimes, every now and then, they would actually even succeed in committing suicide, giving Asian Americans some of the highest suicide rates in the country. And I realized that this pressure to assimilate had to stop. I had to stop it inside of me. And I also had to stop it from being pushed on me. There was the internal force to erase myself and the external forces that were trying to erase me. And I had to realize that I was enough, just the way that I was. But I had to figure out who that was. I had to figure out who I was first. I had to heal. I had to learn who I was, and I had to then share who I was with others. And every time I tell a story about myself, I still learn a little bit about who I am. And that's why I keep telling stories. I keep telling stories over and over again, more and more, every time I meet people. Now, I'd like to make another bet. I'm willing to bet that at some point in your life, you've felt the exact same thing, like an outsider, always on the outside looking in, that at some point in your life, you tried to change who you were to fit in with others. But I've got a crazy question for you. What if you didn't have to change in order to fit in? What if not only could you fit in, but you could be accepted and understood, that you could build stronger connections with the people around you and boost your self-esteem, not by bragging or by being aggressive or by being someone or something that you're not, but actually by being more of yourself, more you. What if I told you that getting ahead in your career, being more visible, and changing your workplace culture actually required you to be more honest, not to hide your Asianness, but rather to embrace it, understand it, and share it with others, and even build structures around it, to recognize yourself and your community as a unique cultural entity that has very specific ways of doing things that need to be recognized and accepted. You see, I know why you don't brag about yourself. You don't want to brag about yourself because you come from a culture that values group harmony over individual needs, right? We talked about the thousands of years of cultural norms that have passed down to you generation after generation. You also come from an immigrant community that has suffered and continues to suffer from terrifying racial violence and has learned the hard way that sticking your neck out and drawing attention to yourself could be dangerous. You carry an entire lifetime of trauma, conditioning, and culture. See, these are the real valid reasons why you can't speak up or speak out sometimes. And these reasons need to be understood. We can't just tell you to change. If you are being rendered invisible by both external and internal forces, what needs to happen? Well, I'll give you 3 guesses. To overcome those internal forces, you need to heal. Then to overcome those external forces, we need to change the culture. We need a cultural shift that involves everyone, an entire workplace working together. Don't change yourself to fit the system, change the system to fit you. And then where those 2 forces meet, where the internal meets the external, that's storytelling. We as Asian Americans, we need to become better storytellers, not just so that other people can hear us and understand our experiences, but so that we can hear and better understand ourselves. You put all those 3 things together, and not only will other people start to see you, then you, just as I did long ago, start to see yourself. Thank you for your time, and I hope to speak with you soon.
Ryan, what a wonderful message of empowerment. Right? Gosh, I'd love to talk with you some more. I hope we'll get a chance to connect at some point. Very empowering message. Thank you, Ryan. And of course, you can feature Ryan at your organization to give you a talk either in person or virtually by contacting us at NAP. Liz, over to you, my friend.
Yeah, what an amazing lineup of speakers we have, Fabian. We got to utilize these speakers for our upcoming events, the NAP convention, the NAP Leadership Academy. I'm just blown away by the caliber of the speakers that Mandy and her team gathered today for all of us.
Thank you, Mandy, for gathering all of this talent.
Thank you so much, Fabian. And again, on behalf of NAP, you're an outstanding MC, and we are
My
so
pleasure.
grateful to you for
Take care,
all of
everybody.
the time you devote to us. All right, so to close out the event today with me is our mistress of ceremonies, Senna Bayasgalan. She is a Mongolian American marketing leader, a DEI advocate, and a speaker with a passion for building a more equitable world and helping people realize their potential. She's a board member and head of partnerships at nonprofit organization Asians in Advertising, supporting over 4,000 members globally. She is an official mentor for APIA scholars, Women Who Create, and Asian American Advertising Federation. And she's a facilitator for hashtag I Am Remarkable by Google, an initiative empowering women and underrepresented groups to speak openly about their accomplishments in the workplace and beyond, thereby breaking modesty norms and glass ceilings. I thought I was busy, but Senna, I am so impressed with your resume.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm so pleased to partner with you to make history together with everyone. So to kick off, the career advancement issue topic is an award-winning marketing creative. As one of the few female Asian American creative leaders in the United States, she strengthens the AAPI community by co-founding Asians in Advertising, a global nonprofit community advocating for AAPI professionals. She has been featured in Forbes, Adweek, South by Southwest, and has hosted 9 sold-out TEDx events. The speaker is Bernice Chao with her message titled The Power of Personal Branding. The Power of Personal Branding with Bernice Chao.
Hello, everyone. It is so wonderful to be here with you today. And thank you for those introductions, Senna. It's so great to see you here as well, Liz. Throughout this incredible API Speaker Expo, you've heard from many professionals about how to improve yourself. However, this is the one talk you will hear about actionable ways to really build your personal brand for that credibility and visibility. A personal brand is the same concept as product branding, only the product you're marketing is yourself. And in doing so, you will separate yourself from everyone else. To start, you'll have to have a unique value proposition, one that is not too generic. You want to be remembered and thought of when it comes to moments of big decisions, such as getting hired and being promoted. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos said, "Your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room." Asian Americans are generally taught to downplay achievements and to be humble about them. However, talking about your achievements in the Western workplace is vital in your professional life and helps you to build credibility for yourself. In other words, if you have 2 people of equal talent and one communicates their achievement better during an interview, you can guess who will seem more qualified than the other. Asian Americans must actively practice owning their story by communicating what they have accomplished based on real facts and authentic results. As an Asian American, crafting your personal brand story will be an essential tool to create visibility for yourself and the skills you possess. As an Asian woman in a white male-dominated vertical, I was often not invited to important rooms and left out of critical decision-making opportunities that would advance my career. That is when I realized I spent my entire career advocating for brands in the advertising space and possess the expertise to advocate for myself and to help others to do so as well. So when it comes to your personal brand, developing your story and building credibility for how you want people to perceive you will take time. My personal brand of helping people bring visibility to brands and people has helped me get promoted out of my middle management into an executive role, land speaking gigs, a book deal. The book is called The Visibility Mindset. And as you heard earlier, an interview in Forbes. This is just a small example where you never know where your personal brand can take you. So let's start by defining what is a personal brand. This term refers to how you strategically think about the image you want to build and how it fits in with your career and life. Your brand should show off your distinct skills and experiences that make up who you are and what sets you apart from others. Thinking about your brand allows you to showcase your strengths and open new doors for yourself and attract those opportunities that you're looking for. One of my favorite metaphors in this space is if you walk into a grocery store aisle for laundry detergent. There's so many different laundry detergents. How do you choose which one to buy? So we purchase on a brand's reputation, what we know about them, who recommended it to us, and if it's popular. This is the same case as our branding. We, like the laundry detergent, want others to buy into us, or in our case, recommend, hire, promote, invest in us. This starts with the understanding of knowing who you are and what makes you noteworthy. Self-awareness is critical to acknowledge where you are today and where you want to be in the future. When you know what you are good at, you can work on shining a light on your strengths while managing your weaknesses. So you can start by identifying your strengths that you can build into your brand. Consider what you've done in the past, what about it was exceptional, and make a strength list to reference. Knowing what you do better than most people will help you lay out your unique value proposition. One way to determine where your brand currently stands is to Google your name. Does anything come up? And if it does, something comes up, what does that say about you? Tim Ferriss said, personal branding is about managing your name. Even if you don't own a business, in a world of misinformation, disinformation, and semi-permanent Google records, going on a date, chances are that your blind date Googled you. Going on a job interview, ditto. So another exercise to really tap into your strengths is to ask 5 to 10 people in your personal and professional network to know what strengths that they perceive from you. This will help increase your self-awareness. Once you've identified these strengths, finalize the ones that make sense for you to move forward with, that you really want to tie into your brand. And you might think that perhaps brand building is not for you and that you're happy with where you are. And that's totally okay. However, I'm here to say, if you don't curate your brand, you stand to be forgettable. Or worse yet, people might curate an incorrect opinion of you. Having a strong brand will make you irreplaceable in the workplace, a sought-after commodity in your industry. It will help you gain visibility in the workplace and attract those new opportunities in your career and outside, things that you didn't even think were possible, and the sky is the limit. This is just a small taste of the conversation around personal branding to elevate your career, and I'd love to come in and speak for you. And I will continue to dive into how to package yourself and deliver it effectively in the world. If you would like to learn more about me, visit bernicechao.com or at Hello Bernice on IG and Twitter. And of course, find me on LinkedIn. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to connecting with you.
Thank you, Bernice. That was incredible. Everyone, please remember that you can book Bernice with our Speakers Bureau. So please see the chat for more information. I just want to say, Bernice is one of the first person who taught me about how to show up and how to self-promote and how to really tell people what kind of leader you are. So this is so incredible. You learn something new every day.
Yeah, such an inspiration, Bernice. I personally know Bernice for more than a decade, and I was seeing all of her accomplishments throughout the years. She's also a part of TEDx, so, it's very difficult to get into TEDx, and Bernice did it, and she supports other women leaders out there, and she's always so inspirational. So such a pleasure to have Bernice on our show today. Our next speaker combines positive psychology and play to heal workplaces, help teams build psychological safety, and assist individuals in addressing their biggest challenges through embracing a play-oriented approach to work. For his work, Jeff was selected by Bamboo HR and Engagedly as one of the top 100 HR influencers. Jeff has worked with many leading companies like Google to infuse more play into the day-to-day time. Our next speaker is Jeff Harry, and today he will show us how to navigate difficult conversations through play. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, everyone. Thanks, Elizabeth. So we're talking about navigating difficult conversations through play. So I want you to just take a moment and think about your most difficult conversation you had with your parents when you were a kid. So my mom's Filipino, and anytime she would say, "We need to talk," or "Wait till your father came home or comes home," I would freak out. Like, there's so much trauma from that period. And I think a lot of times when we're thinking about having difficult conversations, it stems from what were our conversations like when we were a kid, right? And then you're finally like thrown into the workforce. And when you're thrown in the workforce, I don't know about you, but there was an assumption because I'm Asian that I'm, not going to speak up. And I was like, do you know my mom? Do you know what she would say to me when I was younger? Oh, I'm going to be speaking up a lot because she trained me quite well, right? So what we're going to be covering today really briefly is why important conversations are so difficult to have. And then I'm going to provide 3 tips to create a safe space so you can actually have a difficult conversation. So, I saw the icon. So give me a thumbs up if you've had a difficult conversation at work in the last week, and give me a heart if you've had a difficult conversation at work in the last month, right? Now, why is it so challenging to have difficult conversations? The main reason is because we were never taught how to have them, right? We spend more time memorizing the Pythagorean theorem than we learn how to communicate with one another. And then you go and, what's civil discourse now? You go and look on TV, on CNN, and all these places, and they are not actually having conversations. They are having lectures where they talk over each other, but they're not actually connecting. So we have no good models, right? The other part about it is whenever we're like, need to have a difficult conversation at work, we want it to go perfectly. We want an experience where it's just like someone's just going to be like, you're right. I'm completely wrong and you're completely right. And I don't know about you, but I've never had that experience, so there's such a focus on perfection when I come from a place of play, right? And play is the opposite of perfection. Play is rooted in like curiosity and like experimentation and awe and actually like letting go of results. And that's what you actually have to do in order to have a difficult conversation. So let's get into potential tips, right? So we have to avoid like binary thinking that like, you're right, you're wrong. You're a winner, you're a loser, And the first tip that I would give you is stop trying to win a conversation. It's like trying to win playground. Like, it's just not possible. Most conversations aren't even designed for you to win. It's not like a court case where you have like a judge and a jury and it's just like, you are the winner and you are the loser, right? And an obsession with winning a conversation will ensure you will lose it. And I'll say that again, like an obsession with winning, make sure you actually lose, because you might be right, you might have a really good points, but if you can't connect with the other person, it really doesn't matter, right? And what is it that you actually want from a conversation? You want to be heard, you want to be understood, you want to feel seen. So what do you think the other person also wants? They want the exact same thing. So my first challenge to you next time you have a conversation is ask yourself, how can I ensure that person is being heard at the same time that I actually want to be heard? Tip number 2, and this is great to decide whether or not you're ready to have a hard conversation. Ask yourself, do you want to be right or do you want to understand? And if you want to be right, you're not ready. You're just not ready to have that conversation. That's totally fine, but just recognize until you're ready to understand the other person as well, you're not ready to have that conversation, and that's okay. And then lastly, and this is probably the most difficult, is we have to actually look at how good of a listener are we, right? Because there's 4 different levels of listening. There's listening where you're not really listening. You're just like looking at your phone and you're like, oh, I'm listening. I'm totally listening. There is listening to speak, which is like preparing what you're going to say as soon as the person finishes, like, oh, I have a point. Wait, I got one more point, right? There's listening to evaluate, where you're actually just looking at the whole time and you're like, I'm judging you. And that's a contradiction. I'm going to point that out in a moment. So you are thinking about winning. And then there's actual listening, active listening, where you're listening to empathize, where you're listening to not only hearing what they're saying, but also hearing what's not being said. And that's the magical part, the listening to what's not being said. And I'll give you an example of that. I don't know with your parents, but mine all wanted me to be a doctor, me and my siblings, right? So every time they were like, we need you to be a doctor. Why can't you be a doctor? Why are you choosing these other professions? And I kept starting to think about, what is it they're actually saying? Oh, what they're saying is they want stability. They want me to have stability. They want me to make sure that they don't have to worry about me after they pass away, right? So we have to be asking ourselves, listen to what is not being said. So the next time you're in a meeting, right, and the team is like stressed out about like not hitting their quarterly targets, and you can just hear it, right? What is it they're actually saying? What they're saying is like, I'm worried about my job. I'm worried I might get laid off. I'm just worried. And when you actually verbalize to them and you say in front of the meeting, you're like, well, what I believe I'm hearing is that we're scared. Like, we're scared that we're not going to hit our numbers, and that might potentially affect our jobs. It causes a certain level of relief for everyone else, because they wanted to say it, but they were too scared to say it. And, you know, being that MLK Day just passed, there was a really fascinating trick that MLK would do. He would not speak for an entire meeting. You know, whether it was 10 people in the room or 20 people in the room, he would just simply listen and then just jot down notes. And at near the end of the meeting, he would then repeat back what people had said, as well as what they had not said. And simply doing that, all of a sudden he was able to get more buy-in from many different people, because they're like, oh my gosh, MLK replied to what I had to say, actually verbalized what I have to say. And they were so much more bought in to actually following, you know, the movement because of that strategy. So just recapping what we were talking about, 3 main tips: stop trying to win. Stop trying to win that conversation. Ask yourself right before you go into the conversation, do you want to be right or do you want to understand? And wait until you're ready to understand to go in that conversation. And then lastly, listen to what's not being said. And when you recognize all that, you finally are able to create like the psychologically safe space where you can actually connect and have a really good conversation. Thank you so much.
Wow.
And my information's down below. Thanks, Elizabeth. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, such great tips, Jeff. I hope everyone's taking notes, because those are 3 key tips of having great conversations. You know, as a divorce attorney, I handle mediations between battling husband and wife and couples all the time. And if they had only listened to these 3 tips, you know, listen and acknowledge each other, they could have resolved all their issues. You know, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? You gotta listen twice more than what we say. So thanks for the great tips, Jeff. And again, if you guys want to book Jeff for a future speaking engagement, his info is in the chat. And if you want to put him on social media, #Speaker Expo. Thanks again, Jeff. On to you, Senna.
Wow, yes, Jeff, that was an incredible, those are some incredible tips. And I love that you want to be right or you want to be understand. I think that's an incredible way to go into any difficult communication. So the next speaker has 15 years of experience specializing in adult learning and leadership development in large organizations ranging from financial services, consulting to tech industry. She assesses self-advocacy through the lens of culture, psychology, and spirituality, with a focus on strategies for Asian and South Asian women to self-promote at work. Her new book is coming out next week, and you could win it in our VIP raffle right after her message. So tune in. The speaker is Neelu Kaur with her message, Self-Advocacy and Self-Promotion for AAPI Women. Self-Advocacy and Self-Promotion for AAPI Women, Neelu Kaur.
Thank you, Senna. I was born in India and raised in the US. And like many of you, I dance between the we and the I daily on a regular basis. So much so that when we came to the US, my parents would get upset if I said, these are my toys. I had to say, these are our toys. Everything was about group harmony and sharing. And I did this dance between the we and the I for many years. And that included many ups and downs in my career. It included getting fired numerous times, actually. It included many layoffs. And specifically in 2013, I was laid off from a very large financial services company. And as I was being escorted back to my desk, I noticed that when I looked around at the folks that were still in their chairs, I felt like they were part of an inner circle, a clique that I just wasn't a part of. And when I looked around, I saw lots of white men and white women, and I will never know if it was related to bias or if it was simply that I absolutely sucked at self-advocacy and self-promotion. Self-advocacy is an essential skill, especially because it is not modeled for us. And by us, I'm referring to Asians and South Asians that come from collective we-based cultures. And there's lots of challenges of coming or being raised by people from collective cultures and then expecting to thrive in an I-based individual corporate America culture. It goes against our upbringing. We may think we sound boastful, even if we're just talking about our accomplishments. There's so many tools that I use, specifically because I still struggle on a daily basis of talking about myself and my credentials and my accomplishments. I highlight many of these tools in my book, Be Your Own Cheerleader. And today I'm going to walk you through 2 tools that I think you can start to implement immediately. So the first tool is something I call the we versus the I dial. So if you take a moment and imagine the speedometer in your car, there's a spectrum, right? Like there's the we side and there's also the I side. And so we can play around with these dials based on our situation. So for example, for me, when I am in a consulting capacity with a team, I have to turn up the we, where it's about group deliverables and group harmony, versus when I'm on a business development call as a solopreneur, I have to turn up the I dial because I'm talking about myself and my credentials. So you also have the ability to play with this speedometer, the we or the I, on a daily basis, given the situation that you're in. The second tool that I use very frequently is something I've termed interruption shields. And these are words or phrases that we use to jump back into conversations. So let's say there's the loudest voice in the room and you constantly are being silenced. So these words or phrases allow you to gracefully return in the conversation and allow you to communicate your opinion. So some of the phrases I use regularly are, if I may I interject here? Can we circle back to XYZ? So the phrases have to feel authentic to you and also comfortable in your environment. So interruption shields are another tool you can use when you're feeling silenced and you need to speak up. So this goes against our upbringing, right? We weren't taught to speak up. We weren't taught to speak about our accomplishments. We have to overcome these cultural tides. I remember my parents saying, this is not our country. You don't want to rock the boat, and you absolutely don't want to do anything to stick out or stand out. And this, my friends, is a recipe for disaster in corporate America. If we don't learn how to self-advocate and self-promote, it hampers our ability for promotions. We are less visible for growth opportunities. So we must practice, and we have to practice daily. It's like a muscle, the self-advocacy muscle that we must flex on a daily basis. So I invite you to think out a year from today and imagine yourself in a job or a role that you absolutely love. And you got there by self-advocating and self-promoting. You were able to be proud of your accomplishments and clearly articulate your accomplishments. In order for this to become a reality, we must practice daily. You can practice your we or I dial, remember the speedometer. You can practice your interruption shields. And if that feels too difficult at first, you can do something simple. I have an accountability partner who is also Indian, and she and I text each other regularly when we actually speak up, when we voice our opinions. So we hold each other accountable on a daily basis. The collective nature of our culture is so beautiful. We take care of each other. We take care of the elderly. We are part of a tight-knit community. So I'm not here to ask us to eliminate the we part of our culture. I'm here to help us all thrive in the I-based individual corporate America culture that we reside in. I want this for you, and I want this for me. I am so passionate about self-advocacy and self-promotion, so much so that I wrote a book on it, and I offer a whole host of workshops and series around being your own cheerleader. So as we progress and we speak up daily, we are creating a path, a trail behind us for other Asians and South Asians to follow. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Wow, thank you so much, Neelu. Those were some incredible tips. Everyone, please remember you can book her as a speaker with our Speakers Bureau, and you'll be able to see her information on the chat. I mean, at least for me, as a facilitator who creates workshops about self-advocacy, I completely agree with her tips. Even though it's against a lot of our upbringings, it is completely necessary for us to self-advocate because, but your your accomplishments can't speak for themselves. And if they're based on, the actual truth, they're not, bragging. So you don't have to really feel bad about it.
Again, to book Neelu for a future event, email speakersbureau@nap.org. And Neelu has put in all her website, LinkedIn information, Instagram as well to connect with her. Now, time for another poll and more swags. Another short poll is going to be popping up on our screen right now, and it'll take a quick 30 seconds to complete. And from this poll, we're going to be giving away 2 swags. Let's give our team a few seconds to get the poll up. And remember to hashtag first class and hashtag Speaker Expo on all of your social media postings with all of your learnings today, and connect with all our amazing speakers on LinkedIn so that if you need them for future events, they'll be easy to reach. Our team is still putting the poll together. But Senna, oh, here it is. 3 questions on career advancement. So 30-second poll for everyone to answer. And Senna, you want to talk about what 2 swags we're giving away?
Yes, Liz. So once you're done with the poll, we're going to give you away 2 books, both on career advancement. The first book, The Visibility Mindset, is written by our speaker, Bernice Chao, and her co-author. It was published only 2 months ago and is already an Amazon bestseller and award-winning book. And this book is the first career guide for the Asian American community and allies on overcoming barriers and finding success in the workplace today, completed with insightful interviews and advice from inspiring leaders. And yours truly is interviewed on there as well. Can the Speaker Expo swag statistician tell us the result of the raffle?
They'll probably need a couple more minutes to put that together.
Amazing.
What about the second book?
The second book is Be Your Own Cheerleader, is coming out next week. So it was written by Neelu Kaur. This book helps professional Asian and South Asian women who have toggled between the 2 very different cultures of East and West to survive, thrive, and succeed in North American workplace. I'm very excited to read this book too.
And we have a winner. Raj Manivanan of Dow wins the Visibility Mindset book.
Congratulations.
And Rita Saxena of Schneider Electric wins Be Your Own Cheerleader. Congratulations to both of you. And notice how a lot of these speakers all have their own books. It's actually not very difficult to publish your own book because each of us has our own personal story. Each of us has gone through a life that is unique that no one else has lived, and someone can benefit from your story. So, I've authored 6 books myself, so I've gone through the process. And my very first book, I sat on it for about 3 years. Every time I try to write something, I would get writer's block, rip up the paper, and 3 years, never got anything out. I ended up using ghostwriters. So if you guys have not heard of ghostwriters before, go look that up. There's a really great cheap website called Fiverr.com, Fiverr.com, that you can get writing services, illustration services, social media support, anything for $5, as cheap as $5. So check that out. And, if you want to be a published author, it's definitely something that's doable. So moving on, our next speaker for today's Speaker Bureau is a nationally recognized and multiple award-winning researcher, educator, clinical counselor, and social justice advocate who has been featured across multiple platforms, including Forbes Health, National Public Radio, NPR, podcasts, news outlets, and in legislative arenas. She is also a prolific scholar and professor who is considered one of the foremost subject matter experts on the impact of anti-Asian hate on the mental health of diverse API-DA communities. Our next speaker is Dr. Stacey Diane Litam with her message, Understanding Cultural Scripts and Unlocking the Power of Our Stories. Let's welcome Dr. Stacey Diane Litam.
Hi, folks. Just 5 days ago, I was in the Philippines celebrating my Lola, or grandmother's, 91st birthday. My Lola was born in Batangas, Philippines in 1932. This means she was only 9 years old when the Japanese army invaded Manila and occupied our ancestral family home. One morning when she was young, her father woke up to the sound of yelling below. He quickly packed up his 5 daughters and fled to the foothills of Luzon Mountains before taking residence in the Lake Taal volcano island for 4 years. My Lola remembers the smell of our ancestral home, which burned for nearly 1 week after the Japanese army reduced everything in the town to ashes. When recounting her trauma narrative, my Lola emphasizes the importance of values like obedience, hard work, and sacrifice. Without these values, she may not have survived today. Historical trauma refers to the specific adaptations and patterns that are passed down intergenerationally across time. Examples of these patterns could include thought processes, behaviors, and specifically cultural scripts. In my family, my Lola's experiences contributed to some specific cultural scripts based on her life. These are cultural scripts that I suspect many of us will feel a little bit familiar. Work twice as hard to get half as far. Remain silent and don't rock the boat. Do whatever it takes to survive. Though many of us carry these cultural scripts and have often swallowed them whole from childhood, to what extent have we reflected on whether these scripts are helping us or harming us? And to what extent may these internalized cultural scripts impact our mental health, well-being, and relationships? So many of our families have been silent about their stories, and yet understanding our stories and the histories they carry are essential to unlocking our power as Asian Americans. Though it is impossible to aggregate the entire Asian diaspora, many of our immigrant parents avoided discussing the details of their historical trauma because they want to protect their children and avoid burdening others. As a result, the unspoken stories among Asian American families remain unaddressed. Parents avoid discussing it and children avoid asking about it, even adult children of immigrants. The issue, though, is that when our parents avoid communicating openly about their trauma experiences, these stories remain unprocessed and healing can become difficult to access. In reality, most of our immigrant parents did not have the luxury or privilege to share their stories, pursue greater meaning, or engage in personal reflection because they were only able to focus on 2 things: survival, and assimilation. Ultimately, though, this conspiracy of silence that exists among Asian American families contributes to a significant lack of understanding across Asian American generations and can result in significant challenges, feelings of resentment, and attachment wounds between parents, children, and our adult partners. Ignoring our family's historical trauma can have detrimental effects on our abilities to form secure attachments, access joy in our relationships, and achieve optimal psychological health. So, how do we arrive to places of collective healing when so many of us have been carrying around these deep childhood wounds for years? How can we possibly begin the monumental task of understanding how historical trauma narratives and cultural scripts can be keeping us from unlocking joy, achieving better mental health, and developing secure relationships? In one of my workshops, I outlined 5 different strategies to contextualize our histories and unlock our power within. I'll share one of them with you today. We all carry within us what I call a community of voices. I think about this as the internal dialogue that has developed throughout our lifetime. These are the voices that set the foundation for who we are meant to become, and what we can expect from others and the world around us. So this exercise is one that will take much more time than we have together, but I encourage you to at least listen to the process, and I invite you to engage in this activity at some point over the next week when you feel that you have the space, the time, and the emotional capacity. When stressful events arise, take a few moments to identify your internal dialogue. What are the messages, the voices, and the cultural scripts that come up for you? Maybe those voices are things like, you'll never be good enough. Why did you even try? You have to work harder. Don't rock the boat. Write down each of these cultural scripts that you hear in your mind often. Next, identify the feelings that emerge when you read off each of those cultural scripts. And ask yourself, how old does that feeling feel? Does that feeling feel like it's 5 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old? The age of each feeling is often linked to the age of your wounded inner child. The final step is to be curious about what is it your inner child needs? What is it that they would have liked or needed to hear instead? Once we can explore from where and from whom those messages originate, we can learn to turn down the volume of those voices, especially when those messages are ones that are no longer serving us. I believe that to know where we are going, we have to first know where we have been. It's never too late to unlock your power, explore your story, and move closer toward a mindset of healing, abundance, and joy. Start now, start today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stacey, for those words of wisdom. Very insightful and definitely will have an impact on anti-Asian hate in the mental health arena.
Yeah, Liz, that was incredible. That's definitely something I'm working on in 2023 to really change my internal dialogue and, be more kind and be more compassionate for myself. So it was really great to hear more workshop how I can do that with the questions she just provided.
Yes, and Dr. Litam also just put her website and LinkedIn in the chat. So if you would like to connect with her, go ahead and click that link.
Great. So we were scheduled to hear from an Asian ally, Don Sandel, who links happiness, optimism, and positivity to high performance. Unfortunately, it became impossible for him to join us today. However, he has offered his 2022 bestseller, Positive Mindset, as a VIP swag. This book guides you on the discovery of two happy life requirements. One, a positive mindset produces better outcomes. Two, a thoughtful, science and experience-based instruction manual to get you there. All right, now let's get up and fight. Our closing speaker energizes audiences globally with her dynamic style. With a 6-degree black belt in judo, a doctorate degree in psychology, and decades of service as a senior special agent for the US government, she mixes in her Japanese culture and judo philosophy as she provides mental health and wellness tools. And she shares the story of her mother, Rusty Kanakogi, an ordinary woman who changed sports equality that made her the mother of women's judo. Please help us welcome Dr. Jean Kanakogi with her message, Relatable Badass Smashes Stereotypes. Dr. Jean Kanakogi.
Have you ever been bullied, made to feel different, or been made fun of because your culture is different than others? I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. So as a little girl, I was walking with my Caucasian mother and my little brother who was in a stroller, and a Caucasian woman came up to my mom and said, "Oh, how cool. You adopted these 2 Vietnamese babies and you let that Asian man live in your house." To add insult to injury, as a member of the AAPI community, I was expected to just take the berating because that's what we've been pigeonholed into believing. We have been labeled the model citizen, and the model citizen should not fight back. We should not ask for what we want because we're expected to just sit there and be quiet. Oh, heck no, 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 no more. Now is the time to remove that ape from your shoulders. What is an ape? APE, another person's expectations. You see, we can control or we cannot control what other people expect of us, what other people's perceptions are of us. But what we can control is how we carry ourselves and our message. We must set our own standards and our own expectations and then rise to the occasion. My passion is to shatter that bamboo box that we've been placed into, to smash the stigma of shame and to bridge that gap of mental health conversations that our community so desperately needs to address and talk about. It's so easy to say that someone should do something, but who is that someone and what is that something? You know, a lot of times I think we hear that so often that the world is really full of should. I became a law enforcement officer to be that someone and to do that something. I initiate the very needed conversations to empower others to get up and fight for what we believe in, for what you want, and for your seat at the table. Here's the thing. If there's no chair waiting for you at that table, bring your own chair because you belong. You belong at that table, and make it a point to make sure that it is known that you belong. Now, I just mentioned being that someone and doing that something. Think about what it takes to be an active bystander. You can be that someone and you can do that something. I mean, safely getting involved. When you see someone in a precarious situation, you can simply ask them, which way is north? What time is it? Or are you okay? You can get involved. Just make sure you do it safely. Other problems that exist in our community is imposter syndrome. Why do we always believe that we're going to be found out or we're not good enough? What we achieve, that's ours. We are not imposters, we belong. We have experienced so much trauma over the past few years. It's time to be in your solution. Make some choices, choose you. Let me tell you a story about growth mindset and being in the solution. I'm a 9/11 first responder, and recently I've got some news that I have a 9/11 health related matter. So now I have a choice. Am I going to be in my solution and choose me and get into a growth mindset? Or am I going to sit here and ask, oh, why me, and simply do nothing? Well, over the past few minutes, you've gotten to know me, so I bet you already know that answer. Having a growth mindset accelerates your resilience, which makes it less stressful to navigate adversity, regardless of what it is. A growth mindset will help you be open to find opportunity in setbacks. Let's think about this mindset management, this growth mindset, this whole mindset management. You set the tone on how you want to be perceived. You communicate this tone through clarity, through gestures, and through the actual message that you're conveying. As a law enforcement officer, when I place someone into custody and I command a tone of presence and authority to make sure my position and intent is clear, that can be applied to all situations, personal and professional. My mindset management decides how I want to be perceived in that given situation. And you should strongly consider the perception you want to give. Now, in my bio, let's have some fun here. In my bio, I'm described as a relatable badass. I'm going to give you permission right now to say it wherever you are. Say badass. I know it's not something that you say ordinarily in your regular speech, or maybe you do. However, isn't it pretty darn empowering? Empowerment is part of shattering that bamboo box and annihilating that imposter syndrome. So let me share two of my many takeaways. One, get in touch with your growth mindset. Remember, you can overcome anything when you reframe your mind. And number two, stop. Stop. Very powerful word. When you feel that you are going down the path of a fixed mindset, or a mindset like you don't belong, or someone is making you feel less than, simply say, stop. You can use your inside voice and say it inside, or you can use your outside voice and just say, stop. That will give you pause. That will give you grace to reframe, reposition, and be empowered. This is part of what I cover in my positive growth presentation. I look forward to sharing many more takeaways and stories to motivate, empower, and help you be the very best you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jean. Thank you for the empowerment. Thank you for the tools to step out of our imposter syndrome, right? Tools for growth mindset. Thank you so much. That was so incredible. Please, everybody, remember you can book Dr. Jean as a speaker with our speaker bureau. See the chat for the information.
Yes, it all comes down to perspective, and what great wisdom for our mental health and health equity segment. Now we are ready for our next short poll with our final swags. So here are 3 questions on mental health wellness. Take a quick 30 seconds to answer these multiple choice questions, and we will be giving away our final swags. Sina, what are our final gifts?
Yes, Liz. Our final swag is an inspiring memoir published in 2020 to align with the 40th anniversary of the first Women's World Judo Championships. It's the memoir of Rusty Kanakogi, the mother of women's judo, and was co-authored by Rusty and her daughter, Dr. Jean Kanakogi. According to Dr. Jean, it is more than a journey of perseverance. It's a story loaded with passion, antics, and Brooklyn chutzpah. All right, can the Speaker Expo's swag statistician tell us the result? It may take a little bit.
Almost there, still tabulating. And again, when everyone talks about today's event on social media, use the hashtag First Class Speaker Expo. A Canadian, oh, drum roll. Our winner is from Canada. Give a thumbs up if you're from Canada. Michelle Johnson of the Miss Asia Canada organization. Congratulations.
And who won the Positive Mindset by Don Sandel? I think we'll have one more winner.
Still tabulating.
Yes.
Almost there. Adding to the suspense.
Yes, I personally want all of these books for myself because they all look incredible and can't wait to read them all.
Same here. I wish I could participate too.
Right?
Yeah. Well, we have a winner, Elizabeth Fung, VIP of Bernice Chao, one of our speakers. Congratulations, Elizabeth.
Congratulations.
Well, before we conclude today's program, Sina, I wanted to thank you for being such a great MC partner.
No, thank you, Elizabeth. It was my pleasure to partner with the NAP board member to make the first Asian-centered Speaker Expo a great success. Thank you so much for having me.
On behalf of NAP, our founding director, Mandy Shaw, and all of the speakers, thank you everyone for joining us today. Again, I am Elizabeth Yang, NAP board member and past national president. Don't forget to tune in for another day tomorrow for our global YouTube premiere. Your access information should have already been in your email inbox or will be forthcoming by the end of today. Let's give it up again for all of the amazing speakers today, and we will see you tomorrow.